Welcome to the Atlantic Bridge, a podcast about politics viewed from both sides of the pond. My name is Emmett Booth, and I'm here with my co-host, Stefan Sase.
Everyone, and welcome back to our little podcast. As with the last time, we have a guest on the show to continue our newly started series about people who did support other candidates than we did in the 2016 election. And without much ado and no restraint on spoilers, I'm giving it over to John.
Hello. My name's John Comrade. I'm a, I guess for lack of a better term, a lifelong Republican, but I've, for reasons of disclosure, I've failed to vote for the top of the Republican ticket. I think 92 was the last time I voted for a Republican president. But generally, as far as the general election goes, down ballot, I've been pretty orthodox. 43 years old. I work in the automotive industry.
And you're delightful on Twitter.
You're too kind.
Your whole family's delightful on Twitter.
Well, thank you. We're we kind of grew up in a little pressure vacuum, so
sure. That's siblings prepare each other for social media. That's definitely true.
They really do. Bless MySpace.
That is also true. Anywho, carry on. Yes.
One second here. Let me adjust that. I guess that's really as far as background goes. I've worked in the auto industry since 2008. I've been political as basically to oversimplify it. I was a Alex P. Keaton Republican, even though I grew up crushingly poor. For whatever reason, I was a child of Reagan, and that kind of shaped my views of both big or capital and lowercase r republicanism.
Legit. So that led you. So in the Republican primaries, who did that background lead you to support?
Kasich in this case.
Solid.
And then I wrote in Evan McMullin in the general election. I like him. Yeah, I do too. I think there's, just like all of them, they suffer under scrutiny.
They absolutely do. Yeah, I mostly like him as someone I can vent through. He's a vicarious Twitter guy in that way,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's definitely true. So let's support John Kasich. So what? Yeah, how did he speak to you? Why did you want him to be president?
To be fair, I'm pro-life in a practical sense. I have 3 children, but I don't believe in changing legislation as it is, which seems to be my biggest hang-up with the Republican Party. However, judging from the field that he was running against, he spoke to, I guess, Midwestern sensibilities, in the fact that he seemed the most sensible and level-headed of the lot.
Certainly true.
I can't say, item for item that I would conform to his thoughts down the list, but I also kind of learned in 2000 when the pre-election George Bush was portrayed in a certain light, and post-election George Bush turned out to be another thing. True. So it's I kind of allow for some room there, but on the whole, it was more the fact that he wasn't a megalomaniacal carnival barker. I guess. Sure. There's not enough words in the English language to describe what that
carnival barker will do just fine.
But that's really the sum of it. There's not. Just so many of them were easily dismissed out of hand, and sure. I didn't mind Christie 8 years ago, say, but as time worn on, he had that kind of, I didn't mind his initial brashness. what he seemed to do, and I don't really try to take into light how Republicans, they really have no idea what they look like on a mainstream level. I really don't think they have any kind of sense of what they're saying and how that sounds to the average American. You know what I mean? They have a messaging problem. Now, they won the election, so I guess the joke's on me. But I really don't think that they tone deaf, tin-eared, so I didn't really mind some of the like early bombast from Christie, and like I said, it was a number of years ago. And then the rest of them, Rudy Giuliani. I guess some of those guys are just reprehensible sleazes, and so it never really occurred to me that was a serious candidate, or serious candidates.
So as non-Republicans, it's easy for us to come up with ideas of why Trump won. Some probably more accurate than others. Some certainly more snarky or just self-serving than others. Yeah. As a Republican who didn't care for Donald Trump, why do you think he became the nominee of your party? Not just won the election, but why do you think he won the Republican nomination?
To oversimplify it, I really think it was a change election. And I think I really don't think that you have to go too far past looking at the problems that Hillary had with Bernie, who was, up until the election, basically, a marginalized character in the Senate. There's these senators, and then there's Bernie Williams. I mean, we had Ron Paul. So it was kind of the same. I don't want to use the term kook, because that's disparaging. But
sure, but
there's their image, and I think that when it came down to, Clinton had a lot of old baggage as far as how, if you think about how things were in the 90s, and not necessarily economically or whatever, just the carnival that was the Clintons. And I think that 8-year groundwork for the, because if you remember, that was really the beginning of the rise of, for lack of a better term, right-wing media. I mean, it was really, Rush Limbaugh's salad days were through the Clinton administration. And I think that whether latently or not, a lot of, a subconscious thought was kind of laid down there as far as how viable she would be going forward. And I think at the end of the day, she represented not just the status quo of the Obama administration, but, maybe over the last, say, 20, 25 years. And you couple that with the fact that the Republican field, there's such just these candidates, Bob Dole, Romney, even Bush, that they're not grounded in their base. And I think that your common Republican voter were really asking themselves, why am I carrying these guys water when they're not voting? They don't act in such a way that protects my self-interests. And then here comes the carnival barker, and he's like, yeah, I build a wall, we'll ban immigration. Just all these real knee-jerk, visceral reactions to just almost anything on a daily basis. And for them, that was the change that they were looking for. Now, not necessarily, I don't know how many of them are I doubt very many of them are ideologues. I don't even know. The Trump supporters I talked to hadn't voted in a number of years. So it's not like, I think he spoke to a section of this of the Republican Party that's been sitting it out really since Reagan. And even though those two men have nothing in common, I think it was enough for them to stir themselves to action. So I don't know if that answers your question in a wordy way, but yeah.
But Trump definitely cast himself as an outsider and definitely was much more willing to go after the leadership of the Republican Party as being responsible for what a lot of the base didn't like about what was going on. I think that definitely played a role. But, I mean, there's change and there's change. I mean, Rand Paul was certainly running as an outsider in a lot of different ways. He didn't gain much traction. I mean, Carly Fiorina was a business person, who had never been in government. She didn't get much traction. Could it might have something to do with the fact that he kicked off his campaign calling Mexicans rapists? I'm just suggesting that might be part of what made his appeal distinct as compared to other change candidates.
Yes. Yeah. I wouldn't say that he came in with this clear platform of, hey, this is what we're going to do. And, it was, it was things like that. And, you couldn't get them out of the news cycle.
That's definitely a big part of it. Yep.
And I think that there was the press certainly didn't help that they were covering that stuff like it was serious, and there was so much, to their defense in a sense, the level of ridiculousness as far as the things that he would say, if any of the other candidates had just said one of those things, it would have been a wrap. But because no focus was paid to any particular one, that to somebody that had, we'll say, Trump sympathies, to them it just seemed like it was a din of opposition. That it wasn't. It was the voice of concern wasn't legitimate, I guess, and people fed off that. Honestly, I thought that when he brought up the Mexican rapist thing, that'd be a wrap. A week later, we'd be like, remember when he ran for president? And no, it built from one thing to the other, and when, you take someone else, like when Ben Carson and his, what was it, 88888 or whatever that proposition he had, was it the previous election cycle, and within 3 weeks the guy's candidacy was dead, and it was obviously not ridiculous in the same sense, but God, man, it seemed like one thing after another. You'd get up and check your news feed, and it was rapists, and there was the vetting people over religion, and it's like, no, anybody sensible is gonna, enough's enough, and it never became enough.
Yeah, I think this will be one of the major challenges that we face going forward with the 4 years that are now in front of us, because as you can see in the transition period right now, he's keeping it up, and as of yet there has been no method found to actually tackle this problem. Just look at this ridiculous Kanye West thing that we now had, everything is drowning out whatever came before, and you have to give it to Trump. I mean, he's really great at playing the media and getting in control, not really controlling the narrative, but to drown out whatever he doesn't want to be there, Right. But to hark back to a point that you mentioned earlier about so many people who haven't voted in ages going for Trump. You mentioned in the beginning that you haven't voted for a Republican top of the ticket in quite some time. So yes. What was your personal motivation not to do so? Because we can assume, I guess, that many people basically felt the same way and now went for Trump, which you obviously didn't. But I'm trying to understand where the big disconnect is for you from your down ballot Republicans to the top of the ticket.
Well, the something that the Republicans innately do understand is the adage that all politics is local, and I don't see just, by chance. And I've lived around, I currently live in Michigan. I lived in Arizona. I lived in Utah. And generally, those areas are well administered under a local Republican government, because the decisions that are made, those areas are prospering. They're not. It seems to be the will of the people. These people, I've met a couple of these candidates, and it's on a practical local government level. It's sensible governance. At the top of the ticket, for me, and this is just my view on it, is that I've kind of got to the point with the party where I'm not going to be one. I'm not going to carry someone's water that doesn't have my best interests at heart. It's purely self-serving. It's not. I'm not. Who would be the best for the common weal? No, it's for mine. For me and mine. And I didn't see anything to be gained from continually just to say yes to people that really couldn't care what happens with me one way or the other. And that's how I generally feel about top of the ticket Republicans. I mean, Bob Dole wanted to be president just to be president. He's done this country a great service, but there was not, to me, it seems that you have to, in much the way that Obama did, he reached out to people who he seemed that he had their best interests at heart. People believe that. He got that message across. I think a lot of Republican candidates, they want to be president. And that's really what it comes down to. It's not for the greater service of the country, or it's moving a vision forward. It's this would look nice on my resume. And so I just refuse to vote Republican at the top of the ticket until that candidate. I voted for Ron Paul in the last election cycle, and then Gary Johnson in the general election. That's the Libertarians until they start to talk. Kind of always been my safety valve for my tap out, I guess, when it comes down to, I'm not voting for this guy. It's Bob Barr, So that's kind of, it's more of an ideological thing. I completely believe in protest votes. I really don't. I don't believe a vote is wasted, because you're the one that's going to have to sleep with your decision, and the people that I have voted for in the past, that's something that I want to be able to say that in good conscience, this is who I voted for.
Just out of curiosity, did you vote for Obama in 2008?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
No, Bob Barr.
Okay. Oh, really? Okay.
Yep.
That's interesting.
Did you ever consider, even fleetingly, voting Clinton as a way of stopping Trump, or was that out of the question entirely?
No, it crossed my mind. It did. I can't say for a very long period. There was probably 3 or 4 weeks where I kind of wrestled with that notion. I did. And it just never, I couldn't bring myself to do it. And I think that, I'm probably just as guilty of having some of that baggage as far as some preconceived notions of her. But then, at the end of the day, it was kind of along the same lines as I think she wanted to be president. I think it was, if Elizabeth Warren had ran, even though her politics aren't at all like mine, I'd be more inclined to vote for her than it's not anything. It's not born misogyny or anything, or I'm waiting for that Republican woman to run. It's, I think it's personal vision. And I just think that Clinton kind of looked at it as her, I don't know, not birthright, but as her natural ascension, like it was her time, and it was based on little else. You know, she's a good. I think that she would have been a fine president. I really do. I don't. I think that. I don't think that her method of governing would be that much different than her husband's. Honestly, you know, I think that he was
Probably not.
He played to his base when he had to, but I mean, if you remember that from '94 on, after there was really two wheels in play, where there was the sound like we're not getting anything done here, and yet on the other side of it, he and Newt really actually worked together better than any president / majority leader has worked since. You know, with the exception of Pelosi and same party.
Right. I get you.
Relationship. And I don't think in the 22 years since or 20 years since that we've had as effective governance.
How do you define effective?
Bipartisan.
I mean, but there's not much incentive to govern in a bipartisan fashion. I mean, the voters, especially on the right, I mean, the Republican Party learned this lesson very quickly in the Obama era. Okay, if we work with Obama on things, that just makes him look good. And that fulfills his campaign promises. And he's more likely to be reelected. If we withhold support, that drives down his approval ratings. At the same time, that makes our base happy because we have these, people showing up at our town halls screaming at us and primarying us. So we have to hold the line. So I think, I would love effective bipartisan governance, but I mean, that's partially our fault. Like obviously, definitely our representatives are insulated from us in a lot of ways and corrupt in certain fashions. That's definitely the case. But we also, we give them cues. We give them incentives. We give them signals. And, you can look at any polling that Democrats obviously this doesn't apply to everybody, but that a strong majority of Democrats want their elected representatives to work across the aisle to get things done. And a small minority of Republicans want that. And that, that became much more of a thing in the Obama era. And, I would love effective governance as well. But I think the voters have a problem with that, too.
I think that what happened, though, is that by the Republicans continuing in that obstructionist vein, that ultimately they lost control of their own party to Donald Trump. That I think if they would have swallowed that bitter pill and realized during that Obama administration that ultimately whether him looking good or not wasn't going to really much matter, that I think that they would have had more say in what would have happened at the top of their ticket. I think them just simply saying no, where they laid this groundwork of obstructionism for it, and then that the forces beyond their control kind of came out, and now they really don't have control of their party.
That's true. They rode the tiger, now the tiger rides them. That's definitely the case.
And I don't know that was. I mean, if the Senate used to be an august body, man. It used to be populated with people that were well esteemed, or at least if you don't have a revisionist history view of senators through the ages, where that was the things that the conduct that they engage in now. It's essentially a higher priced House of Representatives, and I think that there was some protection against that for a long time. And when the last couple of election cycles, the Republicans have really demeaned themselves in their behavior, and I think for things to go back, because it's not, Republicans are going to be in for a rude awakening, whether it's in 2 years, which I doubt. It doesn't set up very well for Democrats in this next election cycle, but certainly in the, I'm sorry, did I say 2008, 2018? But 2020, I think the things that we were saying about it being the death knell of the Republican Party during this election cycle, I think that it could very well set up to be that way on the next, in the next presidential term, because as far as I'm concerned, people that were vocally supportive of Trump along the way, to me, that was automatic dismissal of their relevance. Was it Jason Chavez from, and his inexplicable waffling of, when he came out and he was one of the first ones to do it, he's like, no, enough's enough. It's like, right on, brother. And then 3 weeks later, like, yeah, sorry about that. To me, it was just mind-boggling. It's like, you're dead. You're done with. Yeah, I'm just done with you. And all these people that I think they're going to have to answer for at some point their hand in this part of the election. They won and they look great now, but I think it's a house of cards. I really do.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. I mean, so talking about the Republican Party, and this has relevance to it going forward. You said Trump had nothing in common with Reagan, and that's definitely true to a certain extent. Reagan had actual experience in government. Reagan definitely had a pragmatic streak. Reagan was charming and knew how to talk to people and, wasn't an overt asshole. But, I mean, Trump didn't make up a lot of the stuff he was saying. He definitely put it in a much more crude and aggressive and hostile manner. But, on the debate stage with him, you had people who were saying Barack Obama is actively out to destroy this country.
Right.
Marco Rubio said that.
Right.
And, the myths about, that Trump was playing on about people of different color and people of different religion. I mean, the Republican Party has definitely been pushing ideas like that for a long time. They've been pushing ideas like that in a subtle fashion, in encoded fashion. Maybe it doesn't always end up in policy, but they've definitely been using rhetoric like that to win elections for a long, long time. And, probably a lot of them didn't actually believe in it, but they told their base it was real. I mean, they fed the Obama conspiracy theories especially. They fed this stuff. Mitt Romney showed up at Donald Trump's hotel and accepted his endorsement gladly in 2012. And he did that because he knew that stuff was popular with his base.
Right.
And, again, that's not saying Mitt Romney's the same as Donald Trump, because he's not. But when you tell your base to believe this stuff for 50 years, eventually they're going to turn to the real thing, to the crude version of it instead of the controlled version you want them to have. And obviously that's not a problem unique to the Republican Party or unique to the conservative movement. That's a problem you'll have in any political coalition when you hop up your base for that long and you can't deliver. But yeah, I don't think Trump's not an alien that just happened to the Republican Party and the conservative movement. He was a distillation and exaggeration of some of the worst traits that's been haunting the movement for a fair amount of time now. I mean, I think Trump exposed that a lot of the conservative base is not really committed to an ideological desire to reduce big government and an ideological belief in free markets and capitalism as, the best possible resource allocation. They're not, it's not, they didn't read Hayek and Mises. It's tribal. It's this big government takes my money and gives it to undeserving black people. I mean, that has been, of course, not all Republicans think that way. Not even close to all Republicans think that way. But that's been there. And Trump took that baton and ran with it in a much more exaggerated fashion. But it was there before him.
Without it, the neocons outnumber the actual conservatives by far.
Sure.
I'm sorry to cut you off there.
Yeah, no problem at all. I just wanted to add another strain of thought to that, because 2016 kind of gave me a new kind of appreciation for Republicans who only want to slash the safety net. So there's that at least. But one thing that really strikes me as odd in all what is written and said about the 2016 election is there's so much made of this perceived coastal liberal elite and their bubble that's totally disconnected from everyday Americans, yada, yada, yada. And on the other hand, you have a strand of the Republican Party. I mean, they made it their Speaker of the House of Representatives who honestly walked around like Ayn Rand's objectivism was kind of a majority opinion in the American people. Like if you really tried to govern like an Ayn Rand acolyte, you would actually have a majority, and that it wasn't always something else that kept this coalition together. What Emmett just said, about the firing up of the base, etc. And I think many Republicans kidded themselves kind of into thinking that their, let's say, sanitized version kind of was actually a majority position. You can hear this all the time in this talk of real America, etc. And I think when you, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you say conservatives in comparison, for example, to neoconservatives or the Trump rebel rousers, you are thinking of people like Ben Sasse, for example, right?
Yes.
So yeah, and I think those were never really a majority in any sense. It's like if now progressives are running around and proclaiming that Warren or Sanders would have won this thing in a landslide, which I think is delusional. The same thing is true about the people who are either Paul Ryan Rand acolytes or the really traditional conservatives like Sass or like you seem to be. So I guess this is a problem that has to blow up at some point, right?
Yeah, and it will, and I don't know if it's part of, I guess, in lieu of religion, I think politics has become our outlet for prophetic doomsday outcries.
Sure, absolutely.
Where that used to be our, almost genetic default on, the end of days, here it is, and and as we've become less religious, that it's moved on to, and for right or wrong, I'm not saying, not taking so much a position on it, but Al Gore or whoever, it's this is it, this is the wrap right after here, and somehow we endure. But to get back to that, at some point we're going to have to answer for this. And I'd also like, just as a side note, I like to go on the record to say that Ayn Rand's unreadable. It really is the most disheartening thing about the Republican Party is they're going around like this is literature, and it's like, man, it's like I wish if somebody wanted to govern through Moby Dick, I'd be more inclined to vote for them than someone that said that Ayn Rand is no, she was a horrible person. It's unreadable. It's garbage.
Exactly.
It's absolute garbage.
You're absolutely right. Not only is she terrible, but it's just so turgid. Every paragraph is just a nightmare.
Man, it's like when's the Dan Brown party going to come around and have on the other side?
Give this speech about architecture. God damn it.
Yeah, it's just equally horrible, and those are the people. It's because I bet you it's the only book they've read,
Sure,
they look, and that's the thing. It's like, you see them at the airport or whatever, and it's like, man, really,
It's unfortunate.
Anyway, I just had to get out there. It's like, because that's. But the thing is that, the neocon part of that, it's, and it's been this way for a long time, is because even Reagan wasn't conservative in the strictest sense,
Sure.
There was a deficit spending, but he also was, I believe, the only president since where there's been amnesty, right? It was at 83, 84. And he took a lot of heat over that. So it's not, I don't know that there's ever going to be, the big thing with the Republicans as far as, because they don't look at it, I think, on the whole as a neocon thing. It was when the rise of the term rhino really started coming to be. And I think that there was a ideological purging through, really through Bill Clinton's administration of the Republicans that were a little more, I hate to say liberal, but, more centered, I guess. It's like they pushed out all the people that were more pragmatic than ideological, and then they were left with people that really didn't have all the ones that were doing the pushing weren't really ideologues. There wasn't any kind of thought behind that. It was more, it got back to what pragmatic in the sense that they were helping out their constituency, whether or not that's through lobbyists or their actual people that voted. It had nothing to do with William F. Buckley conservatism. They weren't Goldwater people by any stretch of the imagination. It wouldn't be recognizable to, you know.
But even then, you know, William F. Buckley, you know, made a strong, stirring moral defense of segregation. I know he later went back on it, and that's great.
Right.
But that was in the Republican Party of the '50s, conservative movement of the '50s too. He's, you know, that the white race is justified to prevail in areas where it's not numerically superior or some such quote. And yeah, right. He later recanted that, and I definitely give him credit for that.
Right.
But that was there. You know, Trump seized on it, but it was there. But anyway, so let's say you're talking about the Republican Party. So like, what do you want to happen within the Republican Party over the next 4 years, 8 years, and what do you think is going to happen?
What I want, it's what I wanted this year. Is I wanted a biblical Armageddon. I wanted it. Seriously, I wanted a 4-year-long soul-searching hermitage of just everything that they had built or were building towards. I wanted it all to burn down, and I wanted them to watch for the next 4 years what their lack of a presence was going to do, how they could have been a part of a common cause, or at least a member of the loyal opposition, as opposed to how they've conducted themselves so far. And I wanted those elements, I guess in a sense, I wanted the same thing that what people who were throwing the rhino label around wanted in the 90s, is I wanted that unsavory element banished. I wanted the people that, I think generally people that don't vote shouldn't. I don't think that there's a level of engagement on their part that they're not interested in information. They're interested in confirmation.
Sure.
And so that's really what I wanted. You know, even now, you know, I'm sorry, I'm a little at a loss for words, because I remember, you know, I've been in a couple of line chats, the Line app, and there were some political discussions going on. And I remember prior to the election night, climbed up my soapbox and just rail, you know, I'm like, drink it all in, ladies. This is, you know, you're going to watch all this burn down.
Sure.
And just being absolutely stunned. It was like watching that Saturday Night Live skit with the episode that Dave Chappelle was on. I was saying the same things, and I'm not a liberal. You know, it's like, oh, well, yeah, they're counting early. No, it's, you know, there's no way that he's going to carry this day. All the Cubans live down there. And no.
Yeah.
I guess I got kind of caught up, you know. I'm still kind of at a loss as why that happened the way it did. What I think is going to happen, honestly, I don't know how Trump is going to not literally survive, but figuratively survive 4 years of presidency. I think that I really don't. I don't know how he's going to conduct himself for 4 years in such a manner that he won't get himself impeached.
It's entirely possible.
Saying that, I also don't know how. The problem that I have with that, my own thinking there, is that so much of what he said was disqualifying leading up to this point. What can he possibly do in the next 4 years that is going to get him impeached?
Well, that's definitely a favorite topic, is partisan polarization, and that's definitely plays into this here. The Republicans, you know, politics is a team sport, as Rick Santorum said. The Republicans, I think, will ultimately gather around him. He'd have to I mean, he said, he could shoot people in Fifth Avenue and not lose votes, and I think that's going to hold true. In terms of how Trump's presidency goes, there's the concept of capturing a presidency or any other powerful actor institution that you gain their influence over them and you gain their decision making. And Trump, he's got that habit of agreeing with the last person he talked to a lot of the time, where he said, I talked to this one person, and because he doesn't know things, he can just be completely taken over by anyone charismatic he talks to for a little while.
Right.
So I get the feeling it's gonna be a lot of that it's gonna be people fighting for his ear, and then whoever wins that day, that's gonna be what he does.
Yeah.
So maybe and things will settle down. There's obviously gonna be people who constantly have his ear, like Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, who runs the Observer. It seems like a pretty much constant in his inner circle. There's a talk about Ivanka serving serving the first lady role, which was just a gift to Twitter. Mwah, mwah. That was so easy.
Yeah.
It's like you can just see all the gifs of people just going, But that was delightful. But yeah, I mean that's, and of course, that's worrisome because if I'm trying to make a list of what do I want in a president, and obviously there's a lot of things competing for the top slot, but near the top is be very good at evaluating information. Be very good at reading the people who's given information to you. And, what's their biases? What are they trying to accomplish? What's true about that? I got to check with someone else to make sure that's true. And what is this other person I'm checking with? What do they think? I generally like Obama's habit of that. I mean, there's been presidents who've been good and great at that. JFK was famously, intense about that.
Right.
Trump, that strikes me as one of Trump's real weaknesses, is that he's so bad at that. I mean, you can go back to him believing the National Enquirer stuff about Ted Cruz's dad and JFK, or it came out just today or yesterday that he was watching WWE, the wrestling show. And he saw they did like a skit, like a stage thing like they do, where like Vince McMahon was in a limo and it blew up. And of course, if you're sentient in watching that, that's fake. But apparently Trump called the network to make sure it wasn't real. To make sure Vince was okay. So that's what I mean. Obviously, most things Trump didn't say during the campaign worries me, but that is really bad in a president, that you can be very easily manipulated and captured. And you look at the people he's surrounding himself with. So we might end up with the Steve Bannon administration for 4 years basically.
There has been quite a lot of articles lately that more or less run the same headline, which is how will Trump govern? And I think the answer to that is Trump will not govern at all. What Trump will do is make decisions, but that's not the same thing.
Sure. Okay.
I guess he will make quite a lot of decisions, and I guess much more than he right now anticipates, because he really doesn't seem to have a clear grasp of what really is demanded from a president. If you think of Obama talking about decision fatigue, and that's basically a guy who had a really clear grasp of what he was getting into. So Trump will make a lot of decisions, but he won't govern. The governing will be done by whoever has the power and the will to govern at any given moment. I think we can bank on Mike Pence as a major source of governing power within the administration. If the current makeup of the Secretary of State stays as it is, I guess John Bolton will play kind of a role.
Oh my God!
Yes,
Sorry,
I know. Then Rick Perry in the Department of Energy, all that kind of stuff. And there will be a ton of infighting going on. And what Trump will do, in my opinion, so my prognosis, is try to stay above the fray. To be seen as not really the president, head of the executive, but the president, boss, CEO of the United States. And if middle management fucks up, he will just fire them, this is the role that comes naturally to him, which he will try to get into. And I actually think he will succeed in this, and this gets to the thing about impeachment. I think impeachment is a total pipe dream, because not only
You're probably right. Yeah.
not only would it require basically democratic supermajorities in both houses, it is also really bad politics. Republicans won't do it because they had so many chances of dumping Trump during the primaries, during the general election. They never have because they fear his base. Why would they do now that he's in power? They would. The need for it is something so drastic, like Trump actively selling Pentagon secrets to the Russians with a receipt. Something like this would be necessary.
Sure.
And this is utterly unrealistic. And if the Democrats in 2018 gain supermajorities in both houses, they won't impeach because then they can simply whoop the whole thing in 2020 in the usual way.
Right, if that's happening, it's already over. Yeah.
So impeachment is totally out of the question, I think. The real
fine, sensible.
Yeah, the real thing is, will this constant fighting in government basically throw something into gears so that nothing of consequence happens at all? Or will they be able to use the obfuscation that comes from all this infighting and the news cycle stuff about it to actually do things? And we don't know because no one has ever tried such bullshit before. So this could be the first bullshit administration that really gets things done, or it could be the total train wreck that many people have been anticipating. It could go either way, really.
Yeah, part of me wonders is maybe it's going to be like Jimmy Carter. Maybe he's just going to sit around trying a lot of things. A lot of them don't work. His worldview kind of falls apart. His supporters kind of drift away from him, and just kind of a sad, lonely man who gets, quietly kicked out of office at the end of 4 years, which would be great. But I think it's, legislatively we might be looking at a lot of gridlock because you're already seeing Republicans realize, repealing Obamacare, that's going to require kicking a lot of our own constituents off the Medicaid rolls, and we don't really have a replacement plan. It's going to blow up the deficit. I don't even know if we can do this. So, I'm not, and also that, the Democrats will filibuster as best they can, and the Republicans will get rid of it probably. But yeah, legislatively, I think we might avoid the worst. I'm more worried about what the executive branch does under Trump. And specifically, like you say, not really, he might float above the fray. But yeah, I'm worried about what Jeff Sessions does. I'm worried about who's the Secretary of State is Rex Tillerson? He sounds like a Muppets villain. I mean, it's just, the lack of subtlety there is amazing. I'm just worried about what those guys do.
Well, none of those guys, regardless, even Rick Perry, who was going to do away with the Department of Energy, none of those guys were going to dismantle their own power, such as it is.
Exactly, that's a good point. That's a very good point.
It's give me this so I can wreck it. They're not. None of them are going to do that.
That's the problem the Republicans always run into is that they run against government, but when they win, it's this is ours now. Right. We don't want to give this up.
And it's been that way for some time, Yeah. I don't know, the thing I guess as far as how they're going to behave is I don't think that, with the exception of, and you could probably count them on one hand, I don't think Trump's overly loyal to anyone. There's this son-in-law in his circle, but if you look at the Stone, Manafort, Corey Lewandowski.
Those assholes. Yeah, that's true.
That it was kind of like the pre-Caesar era Romans that had, a different council running the government every day, and I'm hoping that there's that constant motion will be its own inert power that nothing will get done because no one's going to hold on to that. I mean, does anyone think that Bannon is going to be around long? No, he's not.
I mean, I think that's a very good point. If you have someone new in power every day, nothing is really happening. I'm remembering to bring it all back around to Song of Ice and Fire. There's the army outside Marine, the Yunkish
Yep.
army in Slaver's Bay, how they keep changing their leader every day.
Yep.
And how Martin shows how that just destroys any possible chain of command or getting anything done. Yeah, that's definitely
That was my initial thought, but I certainly don't have the cheek to beat you to Marine on your own podcast. So.
by all means, make analogies. But yeah, there's definitely something to that. But
yeah.
I mean, like, that's, corpses draw vultures and power vacuums demand being filled, and
yeah.
So
and Mandarins run it all. It's really gonna, there's a sizable bureaucracy that's already in place.
This is true.
They're not interested in burning themselves down. They're not. There certainly won't be any reduction in the size of government at all. I mean, there's nothing, and that was, ideologically, if you can, if you can have a difference with someone that doesn't have one, that I have with Trump is the fact that there's nothing remotely conservative about what the guys. Outside of how ridiculous some of these notions are, there's like, oh yeah, smaller government but a wall.
Right. Let's have the biggest construction project in the history of time, but small government.
Yeah, and then but small government, but we're going to dump $1 trillion into infrastructure. And and I can't say that. I'm opposed to there are projects being done. Some of that stuff. I live in Michigan, man, and you look at the infrastructure around here. I mean, essentially, we're operating on an Eisenhower era system,
right?
And that was a long time ago.
Yes, indeed, it was.
And nothing is really, outside of some cosmetic changes. It's essentially the same thing, and it's degrading at an alarming rate. And really, the only places that have done anything have been, I guess, west of the Mississippi, where populations have increased in such a fashion that they can, whether it's the Corps of Engineers or whoever, have been able to plan accordingly. And
that's a good point.
But that aside, it's I think that there's just going to be the inertia idea. Really, it's sad to say that that's our best hope, but I think that's more likely than some sort of general burning down of the government, whether on a literal or practical sense. There are a few things that he's done that I don't completely disagree with as far as what he's said. I don't, as reckless as it may be, I really don't understand the whole Taiwan thing. I really don't. I think that I think some of that is he's going to find on accident that, to me, might be refreshing. I don't think it's going to be based in any kind of thought. But
right, that's the thing.
But it's like,
right?
Why have we been doing business like this for so long?
No, that's fair. I mean, you can always shake things up, and you sometimes need an outsider's view. But yeah, like you're right, even when he does things that you might like, it's going to be by accident. It's going to be
completely
stepped into it, which, is just, we're just going to wake up for 4 years every morning going, well, what's he going to do today? let's go find out, guys.
When you were just talking about where we have to put our hopes, essentially, there was an interesting article on Slate lately that was pinning the hope on a very conservative concept, which is states' rights. Because while there are certainly much fewer states that are blue right now than red, some of them are really big and important, like New York and California. And the article argued that by setting their own regulations or by ignoring and obstructing the regulations out of the White House and of D.C., like red states have done with Obama's agenda, the states will be able, at least in parts of the country, to really stymie a Trump agenda. For example, if you take the big deportations, if a third of the states simply don't comply or comply in a way that is more reminiscent of the Fugitive Slave Act than of anything like actually governing, then there will be a huge problem for the Republicans in actually implementing that stuff. And if they completely stop, for example, climate regulations or enforcement of a minimum wage and all that kind of stuff. But New York and California and Illinois and all that kind of states, they go forward and regulate themselves, and they have enough power to actually have spillover effects in the adjacent states. They have a major problem on their hands, actually, which is kind of ironic because this has been a Republican staple now for so long, and now suddenly states' rights will become this big thing for Democrats, just as the opposite happens with the Electoral College, where you find suddenly fans on the progressive side of this idea that the electors totally should vote their conscience, which I find on the one hand dangerous and on the other hand hypocritical, but be that as it may. But there are certainly aspects that right now are more or less undercovered, because as you said, we're all in this apocalypse mindset right now.
Sure,
and actually, I mean, the danger that Trump won't be as bad as we imagine he will be is a danger in of itself, because it normalizes him even further, and all the bad stuff that he does will always be like, if you compare it to the apocalypse, it's not that bad, but of course it isn't, and yeah, you know what I mean. This is still not good, and while I hope for obstruction as hard as possible against Trump, this is not exactly like it will do the country any good. So, yeah, well, I don't like to see that very much, but I think it's our best hope at the moment.
Go for it, John.
Well, the problem, and this is my view of your guys' side of it, is that, on Twitter where they have the life comes at you fast kind of threads where they'll show one tweet from 3-4 years ago and then a current tweet. And I think that as much as I think the Republicans have an imaging problem in certain aspects, the Democrats suffer from that same imaging issue. And you have, well, take just for the on-hand example of Trump and Pence, where you have how just mind-boggling awful Trump is. And then people were writing at the time, and still do, oh, but Pence is worse. And it's like, he has his own set of bad, but you can't always go to that worst adjective to describe the other side of the aisle. And the stuff that they were saying about Romney in 2012, and then you go to what it is now, and it's like, oh, Romney, voice of reason, you know what I mean? And it's like, but dude, you were saying, Matt Iglesias owned this shit. You were saying this in 2012, that it would be like the end of times if they elected this guy, and now you're begging that he gets some sort of role in government.
There is definitely a boy who cried wolf thing there. Yeah, sure, I could see that.
And it's like both sides are guilty of it, and it's just make sure, my advice to you lot is the same advice I'm trying to keep myself, is that that's something, it's not a matter of trying to find a level of normalcy or acceptance in what Trump's doing. It's make sure that what you're saying matches the deed.
Sure. We have an obligation to have our response be as good as it can be. I agree. Make what you're saying as accurate and as narrow to the point as possible. And because that other side of it, my dad voted for Trump, and like we have the thing where the three of us might have a reaction to Kanye. Kanye doesn't exist in my dad's world. So that whole little like ball of noise that would be caused over that, it's like, what the fuck is this? He's had nothing to do with it. Proportionality is super important. That's definitely good.
And you have to, to get something that you touched on earlier, and it's a damning thing for the Democrats is there's an element of truth to that West Coast, East Coast bubble. I really just look where they voted, and I really have a hard time believing that as far as land mass goes anyway, that 80% of America is this misogynist, reactionary.
Did we say 80%?
As far as land mass goes?
Right, but in terms of the population, it's nowhere close.
No. I understand that. There's something, because I've been around. I know where those people are, but you can't have the mindset that well, nobody lives there, so what does that matter? You know what I mean?
True, but not everyone in the coast is a fancy banker having cocktails with people from other countries.
Without a
doubt.
Like
janitors and
but there's a flyover mentality.
Yeah, but let's be real here.
Yes, definitely. I'll own that for sure. Yep.
Yeah, totally guilty of being like in the liberal elite bubble. But let's be realistic here. It is not like there isn't a bubble on the other side. This talk. This talk of the coastal bubble versus the real America is one of those things that you just bemoaned, basically. But so many people.
Well, I wouldn't say real America. I think it's two bubbles. But yeah, okay, I see your point. Yes, and I'll agree to that.
You know, the thing is, on the other side, like on the 80% landmass, the flyover part, there is another bubble going on. Those are the people that also never made any effort trying to understand a liberal mindset, on the other hand. You know, but in the discussion, it is always like, oh, the liberals, they don't try to understand the plight of real Americans or working class Americans or whatever. But it is not like the other side is making so much effort into trying to understand, for example, the women engaging for Hillary Clinton and their fears of sexism, or trying to really to explore why so many blacks are voting so loyally Democratic. There never has been a real introspective in this part of America about this fact, and this goes for large parts of identity politics areas, you know, or talk about the whole bathroom bill situation stuff. There has been so much talk that Democrats made this a centerpiece of their campaign and how wrong they were. But on the other hand, there was also a bubble going on where no one even saw it as worth of their time to actually try and get some empathy for those people, which is also a problem that we have. And I mean, we are definitely both guilty of not seeing outside of our own bubble, but the other side is too. The major difference is they won the election, but this doesn't automatically make them what they always claim to be, which is like the arbiters of a real America defending itself from coastal elites. And I'm really not accusing you of doing this, but it has definitely been a major talking point about among conservatives and Republicans of all stripes. So this is out there, you know, and so I want to push back a little bit on this at least.
Empathy is super important on all sides of the equation. I think in part the problem is we've geographically sorted ourselves over the past generation or so, that liberals and conservatives don't really live near each other anymore, and we don't watch the same news anymore. So when there's the trope of like, you know, oh, I talked to my racist uncle at Thanksgiving. You know, the reason that became a trope is you don't talk to your racist uncle the rest of the year. Like that's why that became a thing, is because we've this, you know, the mutual incomprehension. You know, I definitely take sides in which side is doing better overall, but in terms of the specific issue of mutual incomprehension, that's definitely a mutual issue. That's one of those things where I'm not particularly hopeful, because I don't know how you break that down.
Well,
other than like, you know, hosting a podcast. But anyway, carry on.
Well, and it's that was going to lead to my point isn't that the things that we thought were going to be a boon as far as social media goes, and expanded, you know, cable channels and all that kind of stuff, is that instead of getting your news from a handful of locations, you know, back in the day, you know, UPI, AP, Reuters, and then you did with that information what you would. Now it's so easy to go somewhere for your confirmation. You don't have to engage. You're not brought to a common field where or media that where you have to listen to that. You can make that choice that, no, I don't want to listen to that nonsense. And then you just go to, O'Reilly or Reverend Sharpton or wherever you want to go and just have someone affirm your prejudices, and that's where we thought that we were going to have more information disseminated across everyone. It seems like all it's made available is for people to find a corner to hide in, and confirm what they've always suspected or maybe never even really thought about, and they're susceptible to.
I think that's definitely a good point. I think that's, like I said, that's exactly why we want to have people on here we disagree with. To break down the walls as best we can.
I just wanted to hark back to one point that we talked about earlier about the 2012 election and crying wolf and all that kind of stuff. I don't necessarily agree that Mitt Romney is this kind of saint that was totally demonized, because neither was the 2012 election as vitriolic as this one, nor was Mitt Romney the good guy. But be that as it may, I just wanted to make a counterpoint in a comparison to Germany here, because we suffer from kind of the exact opposite problem, because for about let's say around 15 years now, our two major parties, the Social Democrats on the one hand, which you can very broadly compare to the Democrats, and the Conservative Party, are very much on a consensus trip, where it becomes hard to make out differences. They don't really attack each other other than very formalized talking points, but there isn't this emotion behind it. German political campaigns are very subdued, are very boring, really, and short. But nothing of this has stopped the rise of our version of the alt-right, which is the Alternative for Germany, and all German pundits are of the same opinion. The reason for this is too little polarization in politics. So something doesn't fit. It can't be that on the one hand, the harsh partisan conflicts in the United States are responsible for Trump and his ilk, and on the other hand, too little partisan infighting in Germany is also responsible for the rise of, in our case, Frauke Petri and his ilk, and her ilk. So something has to give, those explanations can't all be true. And I think you simply cannot, this is one of the typical problems of politics, you cannot get an option that only has advantages. Your kind of politics, what you have right now, with the huge polarization and the harsh, long, expensive, and really emotional and drawn-out campaigns, it has advantages in that you get to know your candidates. They are put under rigorous stress, and people get really involved in the process. But on the other hand, we have all the negative stuff that we're talking about all the time here on the program, so I don't need to reiterate. But on the other hand, if you do it like us, you have much more harmony and much less broken glass. But on the other hand, you kind of muddle all the differences, and people don't feel like they have a choice anymore, and everything is always the same. You have a lot of people in Germany right now who are basically of the mindset that it doesn't matter who I vote for, I always get the same result, no matter who's in power. And this, at least, is not really a given in the United States, to say the least. There are pretty big differences between the parties, not necessarily in all fields. Let's talk Goldman Sachs, yeah, right? But in many fields, Democrats and Republicans really disagree, whereas this is not the case in Germany. Just to give a little bit of a broader perspective.
No, that's great. I mean, again, one of the good reasons to have the podcast is to get that broader perspective. And you're right. I mean, yeah. I guess you need a nice middle ground there in terms of polarization. But you're right. It's not quite that simple.
Well, and it could be a matter that we can't draw that conclusion. We want to make that conclusion.
Right. Exactly.
Like our actions are doing this. We have the rise of the alt-right, which, as fans generally of social media, we see that a lot more than perhaps it actually exists.
True. There's another bubble in itself. Yep.
And then the other side, you say you're basically the almost dispassionate political sense that the Germans have, and you want to tie that again to the rise of the alt-right when it's neither. It could very well be that it's not one's right and one's causing it, and so the opposite can't be. It could stem from something else. It has to.
Sure.
Well, I mean, I guess it doesn't necessarily have to, but the possibility is certainly there. And really, I think with Americans have, to me, it just seems like a recycling of that time-worn and honored nativist tradition that this country has.
Absolutely agreed.
And I don't know that the reflection of the rise of it here really necessarily matches the number or the reality on the ground of people coming into this country. I mean, Obama, correct me if I'm wrong, hasn't he deported more people than any president since?
Any president ever. And the illegal immigrants currently coming in are certainly a trickle. And I've seen studies that, and I can't cite it at the moment, but like the strongest anti-immigrant sentiment, either in terms of voting or Google searches, is coming from places not where illegal immigrants are, but like the towns where like they fear they'll be next to have a wave of illegal immigration.
Right.
Not actually people dealing with immigrants, it's people they're in the next state farther south, but they'll be here in Wyoming before long.
Right. But if you're in those areas,
there's definitely a lot of causes going on here that we have to be aware of. It's definitely easy to fall into this trap of, okay, here's what's important in my universe. That must be what's causing this. And you're right. It's like you said, your dad voted Trump and doesn't give a shit about Kanye West. So.
Right. Well, and he was so maddening because I would get into, he's
sure, of course.
He's on disability. He's spouting this position, and then it's like, but Dad, what this guy has in mind for you and yours, is it going to jive with the reality that you have now? And this,
that's frustrating.
And it's, and it wasn't always like that. That wasn't the environment that I grew up in with that same man, and so it's like, what's changed? It's a matter just of being older. Because if you take it one step further, a point that, I tweeted, every last baby boomer to Gitmo.
I did. I like that.
That was the generation that was supposed to that was the sea change.
Right. They were going to save the world, as I recall. And
that was, that's the Woodstock generation. And that's,
exactly.
It's like, we stopped the war and blah, 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 and it's like, now that they're at the age where that's where people, for whatever reason, come to power, from 55 to 70, and it's this, and it just like blows my mind that this is the position that they're leaving us in, that these are the positions that they have on things. It certainly isn't. It's hard to compare. I think because the level of activism, genuine activism, was certainly a lot more then, I think, than it is now. So, but that could also be a matter of imaging from.
That's true.
As far as how they want themselves to be portrayed in history. I talked to, I'm a native Detroiter, but I live on the other side of the state now. And I was talking to a woman that would have been, she was 18 in 1968. And I was like, oh, so what were you, were you rioting? Whether it's like, what were you doing? And, oh no, it's just like, I think I worked in a grocery store. And,
Sure.
All right on,
Not everyone's in the revolution. Yep.
Yeah. And so my point.
No, I get you.
I just think that I can't believe that that's where we're at with this, and I really don't know why. That it's like that generation has betrayed their ideals in one way or the other. It's not, even if you were like somebody who had served and you were generally conservative or whatever. It's like you're not doing that memory any justice either. It's and I don't know. I don't.
Yeah, Well, we all failed and we don't know how we got here. Having said that.
Tune in next week.
So yeah, we're verging past the hour mark, boys, and I do have to get to work before too long. So what do we got in terms of closing, synthesizing statements? Stefan, all the pressure's on you. Go.
All the pressure is on me. I can really feel it. I don't know if I have some grand unifying theory to wrap this all up. I think quite many people will be surprised at what the next 4 years will bring. And we will be too. I really can't wrap this up here right now. It is just still too much to take in, really. Sorry.
No, that works for me. I mean, all I was going to say is that, there's going to be a struggle for what the Republican Party wants to look like under Trump and post-Trump. And John, I hope you win. I hope you win that struggle.
Well, I hope so too. The thought that I would leave us with is that's continue, or at least start to, if you're not so inclined, those that are listening, engage purposefully with people that ideas aren't like yours, and let them talk, and maybe don't even respond. Just let them have their say. And
sure. Listening is good.
It's not necessarily it's not necessarily trying to change minds. I think that certainly what has to happen is that there's got to be, I guess, a greater empathy on the whole for everyone else's position. And I think an environment has to be fostered where people feel less isolated from each other. And it's
sure.
All the tools there are available for people to have that happen, and they really need to start engaging themselves in that way. And I believe in there's like I read somewhere where you think 2016 how bad it is, yada yada. Try 1916.
Sure, sure.
Literal, it's you can't even compare, as much as we'd like to bellyache about what's going on now. And so just bear that in mind, that the human will endure. It's just be good to each other, be compassionate, keep an ear open, and just listen more than talk.
Right on, man. I love that. Good
Thank you for being
man.
on the podcast, man.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. We really appreciate it. We love getting, we love getting other voices on here.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening, guys. You have been listening to the Atlantic Bridge Podcast, politics viewed from both sides of the pond. One episode every fortnight, every Friday. You can follow us on Twitter, @StefanSasse and @PurQuentin, on Stefan's German blog, www.deliberationdaily.de, or on PurQuentin.tumblr.com. See you soon!